In medieval England, there existed a seemingly barbaric and cruel tradition. Lawbreakers and immoral individuals who roused public anger, once captured, would be skinned alive before their execution, and part of their skin was used to craft exquisite, human skin books. These books, covered in human skin, detailed the complete list of the owner's sins. Legend has it that the human skin covering these books possessed a spirit. They carried with them resentment, transferring the soul of their previous owner to the new possessor, turning them into a villain, eventually being called to death. The owner of the old bookstore outside the West Gate, Derek, paid me a visit. As a regular customer of the old bookstore, I, a fairly well-known current affairs commentator, was quite familiar with Derek. Derek got right to the point with his request. He mentioned that among the old books I had purchased from his store a few days ago, there was one he had long been searching for and had finally found, which was of some help to him. As he hadn't had the chance to sort it out, I had bought it. Now, he was willing to pay double the price to buy it back. I smiled and made an excuse, saying that my study was a mess and that I would need some time to locate the book, but if I found it, I would immediately return it to the old bookstore. After seeing Derek off and closing the door, I found the book Derek referred to among my recent old book purchases. The cover and back of this book were a gloomy yellow, resembling the color of fingers long stained by smoke. There wasn't a single word on the cover or back of the book, no publisher, no name. Holding the book in my hands, it felt cold to the touch, with a texture distinct from paper, like grabbing a hibernating snake with bare hands in winter, cold and slick. I found the book odd when I opened it, which is why I placed it in my pile of purchases. The pages inside were curled and yellowed. This book was handwritten, adorned with florid English letters, emanating the writing style of medieval nobility. After examining the book, I completely abandoned the thought of returning it. According to the records inside, this book was a human skin book. The skin on the cover belonged to Sebastian, a brutal medieval English bandit who relished in torturing civilians and women, slashing their throats, then pulling the hemp rope taut around the neck to make the injuries more compressed, prolonging the agony of death. Thus, the blood gushing from victims' throats would saturate the hemp rope. Sebastian collected these ropes as trophies. He enjoyed amassing them and playing with them in his idle moments. After Sebastian was captured, he was executed by hanging. To quell public anger, the judge had the skin from his face removed to create this human skin book. Those blood-soaked ropes were also cut into small sections and sold to the common people, signifying that Sebastian was torn to pieces to appease public resentment and anger. For me, owning a human skin book like this was an incredibly rare opportunity, a collectible of social and cultural significance. Instantly, I decided to keep this book at home as a treasure. I made up excuses numerous times, refusing Derek's requests to have the human skin book returned. Gradually, I grew fond of the touch of the human skin book, pulling it out daily to wipe it with a clean towel, then reading the story of Sebastian. As usual, I entered my study, only to find my desk had become disheveled. My heart clenched suddenly. Could someone have entered my study at night and taken my treasure? Fortunately, the human skin book hadn't gone missing. However, I discovered several small segments of hemp rope on the desk, each about the thickness of 2 thumbs. The color of the ropes was a dull, purplish hue. Picking them up for a closer look, I could smell a faint odor of blood. A cold sweat broke out over me. These were the blood-soaked ropes mentioned in the human skin book. But how did they appear in my study? Likely only Derek knew about my possession of the human skin book. If it had been him who came in, surely he would have taken the book by now. If not Derek, who else would joke with these blood-soaked ropes, everything coinciding so closely with the record in the book? The more I thought about it, the more anxious I felt, as if another pair of eyes were spying on me in the study, as if all my actions couldn't escape this surveillance. To uncover the reason behind the appearance of the bloody ropes, I decided to stay awake until I found the answer. Yet, this plan was foiled by a mysterious force. Normally, when rushing to finish articles, I could make it through a long night with just a cup of coffee. Now, one moment I was fully awake, but the next, my eyelids would droop uncontrollably. A few days later, an unexpected visitor came to my house. A tall, middle-aged man introduced himself as Peter Simmons from London. He said to me, "I am a psychologist, and you are currently in the midst of a peculiar affliction, do you know that?" As he spoke, he presented his counseling qualification certificate. He mentioned that he was visiting Manchester for a holiday. The previous night, he had seen me wandering the streets with a piece of hemp rope in hand, appearing like a walking corpse. From the lack of spirit in my eyes, he deduced that I was suffering from somnambulism. Dr. Simmons, following his medical instincts, had followed me all the way home, watching as I entered and then closed the door behind me. This news startled me but also came as a relief. It likely explained why there were blood-soaked ropes appearing in my house. I had some understanding of sleepwalking. I felt that the recent anxiety about the Human Skin book, coupled with familiarity with its recorded details, had stimulated and led to the onset of my sleepwalking. I thanked Peter Simmons and indicated that I would promptly seek medical examination and treatment at a hospital. Upon waking the next morning, I found that things had taken a turn for the worse. At my bedroom window, I found a cat hanging by a noose made of hemp rope, its eyes filled with terror. The upper body of the cat, with its skin peeled halfway off, hung there, exposing the shocking pinkish muscles underneath. Subconsciously, I looked at my hands and arms and, indeed, found dried blood. On the windowsill lay a blood-stained blade. Feeling a tingling in my scalp, I walked over, stifled my fear, and cut the cat's body down from the rope. The cat's throat had a gruesome wound, almost like a small mouth grinning at me. I threw the cat's body to the floor in a fit of panic, gasping heavily. I couldn't keep going on like this. I decided to lock up the Human Skin book and no longer read it. However, this action did not save me from my symptoms. A few days later, I discovered a dog hanging by a hemp rope on the living room door, just as pitiful as the previous casualty. The nightmare-like experiences nearly drove me to insanity. I began to hesitate about whether to return the Human Skin book to Derek or not. Perhaps doing so could rescue me from this nightmarish existence. During my indecision, I received a letter. It said that the sender knew I possessed a Human Skin book and hoped I could transfer it to them. Such antiques as a Human Skin book are generally reclaimed by the state and required to be handed over to museums when discovered. Therefore, he hoped I would contact him discreetly, and he was willing to offer a substantial sum of money. At the end of the letter, there was a phone number. I immediately dialed the number, and a hoarse-voiced man said he was a researcher of Human Skin books. He said, "You should consider it carefully and give me that book as soon as you can. From my research, I've found that Human Skin books possess a soul, and staying with it for too long, you'll be corroded by the soul of the book's original owner, becoming as evil as they were." I stood there, chilled to the bone, recalling my recent unusual behaviors and experiences. Could everything this man said be true? Could a Human Skin book indeed transmit such evil soul? A week later, I tentatively reached an agreement with him, consenting to transfer the Human Skin book. However, there was still disagreement over the price. I had done some internet research. Some foreign experts argued that finding a Human Skin book could turn someone from a pauper to a millionaire overnight due to its inestimable value. But the man on the call was only willing to offer tens of thousands for the Human Skin book. I declined the mysterious man's slight increase again. I said bluntly, "I want $500,000, or there's no need to contact me again." Putting down the phone, I smugly thought about the large sum soon to appear in my account, allowing me to acquire many long-desired things. His desire for the Human Skin book surely meant he would eventually meet my price. After a simple dinner, I wanted to take a hot bath and then retire to my bedroom. Just as I soaked in the warm, foamy bathtub, my eyelids began to droop involuntarily again. Fear, like a demon, once more seized my heart. I reminded myself that I could not fall asleep like this lest I begin sleepwalking again, possibly committing those horrifyingly cruel acts. Yet, my consciousness gradually slipped into slumber. When I came to, it was the early hours of the morning. I found myself lying in my bedroom bed. Jumping up, I suddenly felt a burning pain on my neck. Turning on the bedside lamp and carefully inspecting in the mirror, I discovered a small cut on my neck with irregularly sized beads of blood clinging to the edges, appearing eerily strange. Just a few millimeters more, and it would have severed an artery and the throat. I felt entirely drained at once. It was unimaginable to think that had the cut been any deeper, I'd be an insensate, cold, rigid corpse now. This hypothetical scenario sent shivers down my spine. I paced the room restlessly and soon spotted a blood-stained knife blade on the floor. The blood on the blade had coagulated long ago, appearing startlingly mottled. No longer daring to have any other thoughts, I immediately went to the hospital to get my wound treated. After a simple dressing, as soon as I got back home, I quickly dialed the mysterious man's phone number. Before the mysterious man could speak, I blurted out, "You tell me how we're going to trade." The mysterious man was not comfortable with using delivery or postal services. He insisted on an in-person transaction. He would hand me the cash directly, and I had to bring the human skin book. The transaction location was set in a secluded town by the highway near the airport. There, by the highway exit, was a dilapidated gas station, abandoned for many years, unlikely to attract unwanted attention. He also instructed me not to drive there. An extra car suddenly appearing at the rundown gas station might raise suspicion. The time was scheduled for the early hours of the morning. That way, I could set off from my house in the dead of night, take my bicycle there, and bring it inside the decrepit rooms of the gas station. Once all the preparations had been made, my only thought was to get rid of the human skin book as soon as possible. The last thing I wanted was to fall back into tasting the sensation of having my own throat cut. At midnight, I retrieved the human skin book from my study, stuffed it into my backpack, and then left my house. After ensuring nobody was around by peeking outside my yard gates, I saw not a soul out on the Manchester streets except for the dim glow of street lamps. I then hastily took out my bicycle and started pedaling towards the agreed location. Late at night, hardly any vehicles were passing on the highway. I took a dirt path that ran alongside it. From afar, I could already see the destination. Under the night sky, the gas station lay like a still beast. Inside, not a sliver of light shone through. I took out my phone and dialed the number. After a moment, a faint beam of light from a flashlight emerged from a room within the station, indicating where the trader was. I wheeled my bike towards it, engulfed by darkness. When the flashlight went out, I felt a twinge of fear, as if the darkness would engulf me like the mouth of a monster. Suddenly, there was a rustling noise from behind. Startled, my mouth was swiftly covered. My arms were twisted behind my back, an unknown person shoved a cloth into my mouth, and then I was pushed and shoved towards the back room of the gas station. In the back room, lit by an oil lamp casting a dim light, sat a rough and fierce-faced man, looking at me with a sense of amusement in his gaze. In the room, a thick hemp rope hung from the ceiling, with a plastic basin underneath. And to one side, an elderly man held a knife gleaming coldly, staring at me expressionlessly like a hunter greedily eyeing his quarry. The cloth was removed from my mouth. Gasping for breath, I started thinking of a way out. I deliberately asked the man in a calm tone, "Are you planning to kill me to keep me quiet? Truthfully, I've been cautious of you. The human skin book I brought is fake. Fearing that you'd take the book without paying me, I've hidden the real human skin book in a place known only to me." The man gave a ha-ha laugh. Shaking his head, he said, "Fool, this is just a game. The human skin book you got is also fake. It's from the skin of my previous prey, so it's worthless. Your skin, however, will become a human skin book after tonight. We'll use it to lure our next victim." I was dumbfounded. I never imagined things would turn out this way, nothing like the mystery and eeriness I had envisioned. To think, I was merely someone else's plaything. Thinking about my impending death, I somehow calmed down. What's the point of doing this? You won't gain any wealth, and you'll be charged with murder. Let me go, and I'll give you all my savings. I'll pretend as if none of this ever happened. The burly man sneered, "Kid, that won't work. What I seek is the thrill, the enjoyment of the entire game process. Whether it's cruelty or perversion, you're just out of luck." Then, he aggressively pushed me down, firmly pinned me to the ground, and brutally tore off my shirt. The knife slowly approached, its blade cold enough to make my skin shiver. He seemed to relish this process of instilling fear in others, a slight smile on his face, a smile chilling to the bone. "Don't move." Suddenly, blinding lights lit up from all sides. A group of police officers rushed in, their guns pointed at the butchers, intent on taking my life. "Did you fucking call the cops?" burst out in anger, "dealing in human skin books, you'll be in prison too." I was utterly bewildered. At that moment, the self-proclaimed psychologist, Peter Simmons, stepped forward from behind the police, sneering at these men. Not him, it was me. With that, he pulled the human skin book from my bag, tenderly holding it in his hand. He said, "If I'm not mistaken, the skin on this book is from a young man from London named Thomas Simmons, my brother." It turned out that after Thomas Simmons obtained the human skin book and shared the news with his brother, some bizarre incidents started happening to him shortly afterward. A panicked Thomas sought help from his brother, but soon refused any assistance because someone offered a high price for the book. However, after Thomas went to meet with the buyer, he never returned. Later, the police found his mutilated body in an abandoned house in the suburbs of Manchester. Thus, Peter Simmons came to Manchester, guessing the killers would show up here again. Indeed, the killers made another human skin book here, then paid a large sum to the old bookstore owner, Derek, to circulate it. The entire process was a cruel game. They would use the bookstore owner to make a buyback offer to those who purchased the human skin book, prompting them to discover its secrets. Then, the killers would create bizarre phenomena, using hypnotics and gas anesthetics to sedate the buyer, setting up scenes involving blood-soaked hemp ropes and killed animals. They took perverse enjoyment in the buyer's fear, then posed as researchers seeking to buy the book, deeming anyone who showed up for the deal as greedy enough to be killed and made into another human skin book for their next target. I was practically an exception, stubborn about the price and reluctant to trade, angering the butcher. They even discussed inflicting a little more torment on me. Eventually, it was Peter Simmons himself who, looking for these killers, anesthetized me with gas and lightly cut a wound on my neck, causing my defenses to completely collapse, and quickly facilitated my transaction with these men. Peter Simmons, holding on to me, who was utterly panicked, sincerely said, "I'm sorry." I tightly grasped his hand, knowing, even if he hadn't rattled me a bit, these butchers would continue to raise the price, whetting my appetite, and then brutally murder me. That butcher confessed to all of his crimes. Using the human skin book as a prop, he had murdered 14 unwilling participants in his game, their cries and pleas only serving to fuel his bloodthirst and excitement. He was a deranged psychopath. But his parting words gave me pause for thought. After confessing his sins, he laughed malevolently and said that those victims did not die in vain, for it was not I who killed them, but greed.